Hi, and welcome to Whypartisan, a conversation between two political junkie friends from different sides of the aisle, hosted by Kristen, Howerton, and Paul Martin. Hello. Well, welcome to Whypartisan. If you are listening, you may be wondering, where did we go and what is happening?
We're still alive.
We are here. It has been, gosh, how long, Paul, since we did an episode of this?
2018?
2018?
Yeah, I think
you're
so.
right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were covering that election, and we ended up having to stop the show because you got a job that was a little bit incompatible with.
Yeah, I couldn't speak about these issues. They're polarizing issues, and it was the kind of space that just wasn't a win-win. So
well, and to be fair, you were doing fundraising for foster children.
Yes.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, and I was outspoken against the border confiscation of children and separation from families, which we don't need to go into. But today we're going to talk about at least a couple of things. We're in an election this year.
Yes.
And it's almost going to be Trump against Biden. Haley probably will get out soon.
Which is why, I mean, you and I were chatting and we were like, should we bring it back? Should we bring it back? You're in a different role now.
Yeah.
So you're not having to be as quiet. But, I just feel like there's so much happening in the world right now that both of us were like, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's
do it.
There's a lot going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be divisive. And just for those of you that never watched our vision, I'm a Republican, or I'd like to say a conservative, a classic conservative.
And I'm a Democrat.
And probably not just a moderate Democrat.
I am pretty left.
Yes, pretty left. But our idea for this podcast, for this video, is to try to dig as deep as we can into having a civil conversation. And even though the topics that we're going to talk about, whether it's Kristen says something or I say something, we're going to really work to convey our beliefs and the reasons behind them. This is not a hack partisan. It's Whypartisan. It's We're meant to do this in a civil way, right?
Yes, and we are friends in real life. We have been friends for a very long time. We play in a band together. Our spouses are friends. And so, I think that one of the goals of this is to model what civil discourse looks like.
Yeah.
What does it look like when, instead of seeing the right or the left as this sort of monolithic group that you're against, what does it look like when it's your friend, when it's a real living, breathing person who has reasons for the way that they vote?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest phenomenons about this political division that I've thought about, and you've heard it before, is that it's easy to demonize in theory. It's easy to demonize the abstract.
Yeah.
But when that person's your next door neighbor that watches your dog when you're gone, or if it's your cousin or your niece or your nephew, actually when it's a real person at work, it's harder to demonize that person when you have a relationship.
Right. Yes, I agree. Okay, so we're going to dive into current events, and that's what the format of the show will be.
Yeah.
We will, on a semi-weekly basis, depending on our schedules, we'll be coming in and just talking about what is going on in politics in that week or that month. But before we dive into this week, let's give a little update on what we've been doing since
for
2018.
Sure. So I ran for Congress.
No big deal.
Ran against a Republican. I primaried, that's the term.
You ran against Dana Rohrabacher.
Against Dana Rohrabacher. He had a horrific history of supporting Vladimir Putin.
He had that seat for a long time.
He had it for 30 years.
Yeah.
He ran on term limits. I just could not believe that this guy was our congressman.
Yeah.
And I got in the race, and I really made it a human rights campaign. He supported Vladimir Putin when he canceled the adoption of Russian orphans to the U.S. in 2012 as retaliation. And I'm a human rights advocate, and for children especially, and I just couldn't not do it. I got in the race. I got some really exciting national attention, which was super fun and humbling. And then the system, the California and Orange County establishment found a way to make sure that I don't move on.
Yeah.
But I was very happy to play a part
Yes.
in getting rid of Rohrabacher, which we did.
He did lose the seat in that election that you ran in,
Yes.
and he lost it to
Harley Ruda.
Yeah.
Who was a one-term nice guy.
Yes.
Really liked him. Democrat.
Yeah, I like him too. Yeah. So that was pretty exciting.
It was fun.
And then now for a job, you are...
Well, I'm launching a new organization. I work in the fentanyl issue. I work in children's children's rights, children's mentoring children. I do a lot of work in New Mexico in one of the areas called Espanola that is the epicenter of the fentanyl crisis. And that's a new venture for me. And you wrote a book of, among other things.
Yes,
during
I
that
did.
time.
Put a book out in 2020 of all times, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And, but that was exciting. And then since then, I have really been doing therapy full time.
Okay.
That is my main gig
Good.
At this point, which keeps me very busy. And I have 4 teenagers.
Yeah, wow. Yes. I remember those days.
Yes.
Younger children don't
You're a
let
step
you
ahead
sleep.
of me.
Older children don't let you
That
rest.
is the truth.
Right?
That is the truth. Yeah. Well, and then a few things have happened politically since 2018.
Just a couple.
I mean, my goodness, we had January 6th.
That peaceful walk through the Capitol, as some Republicans like to call it.
We had the Trump presidency.
That thing happened.
I mean, we talked about that a bit.
Yeah.
What else?
I mean, yeah, and then we had Biden come. We had COVID. We've had...
That was a political... I mean, who would have thought that a pandemic would have turned that political, but it was incredibly political.
It was. And it was distinctively political in the United States of America.
That's true.
Unlike virtually every other
You're
country
right. That's absolutely
that
right.
treated it, that respects the guilds of science.
Our country does seem to have an uncanny ability to turn everything politicized and polarized.
Absolutely. Let's face it. That's the game. Because that's how you win votes. And the Republicans decided, despite the fact that the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, the World Health Organization, the American Medical Association all said that maybe it's good to have a mask. Like when you go into surgery and the doctor walks in, they wear a mask because it might prevent germs.
Right.
Well, that became a political issue in addition to everything else.
I mean, this is a side note, but I just watched last night the documentary Boys State with India. Have you seen this documentary? It's great. It's A24, and they follow, you know what Boys State is?
No.
It's it's run by the American Legion. They have Boys State and Girls State, and each state sends a number of teen delegates to do like kind of a fake election.
Yes.
You've heard of
I've
this,
heard of
right?
This, yeah.
And so they follow these students, but one of the things, and they put them in 2 parties, and these parties are not our parties. They're made up parties, and they turn on each other.
Oh, fascinating.
And they polarize. And so it's this sort of, look at like that tendency. And in the documentary, some of the kids were talking about the dangers of a 2-party system and how that is the natural trajectory.
Fascinating.
But what do you think about that? Like, is that the nature of a 2-party system? Are we just going to do this forever and ever and ever? Or we have 2 parties,
well, I mean,
one party says something and then the other party automatically goes to the other side.
I mean, it's just psychology and messaging. The easiest way to get a vote is to have a slogan like open borders or build a wall.
Yeah.
And it's easy. It's, it's immediately grasped.
Yeah.
And we have nothing in the Constitution, obviously, about needing a 2-party system. That's just the way things have gone. And you have no labels now, which we'll talk about, that's going to be one of these other groups trying to compete with a third party. So, I mean, it is what it is. But one of the reasons I remain in the Republican Party is I believe that we need good, solid, or moderately rational people in both parties.
Yeah.
Not, I said a million times when I ran for Congress, why should one party, the Democrats, have a monopoly on issues of human rights, civil rights, social justice, common sense gun safety, and basic conservationism? And I say, even if it's really good PR, which it's more than that, but the Republican Party, in my view, has gotten so far away from advocating for those issues in the way that the Democrats do.
Well, I mean, they've become anti-woke. I mean, they're pushing back against DEI. They aren't just not active, they're reactive to these concepts.
Yeah. And some of the concepts, I think, go a bit too far, but we'll get into the weeds of that later.
Yes, we
will. It
will.
might get ugly.
All right. What do we want to start with for right now? What's happening in our political landscape?
Well, I mean, now officially we have 3 candidates. Essentially, we have 2 Republicans still in the race, Nikki Haley and Donald Trump, of course, and then Biden's going to cruise on to be the nominee for the Democrats. Nikki Haley, it's such a long shot. I love seeing her grittiness. I love seeing a woman taking it to the men. I like that.
I like that too, but some of her comments on race have been very problematic.
Well, she did. Did you see her on Saturday Night Live?
I did. I did see that. And I think there's an interesting thing to be said about like her kind of poking fun at it, but she hasn't issued a real statement, Like if she thinks that she made a mistake and that it is true that American society has been steeped in racism, she should correct that beyond a joke on SNL.
And the way these people think is that the means justify the end justifies the means. Yeah. So in her mind, in South Carolina, which she's competing in, the last thing she wants to do, that was the first state to secede from the Union, is to say slavery is the reason for the Civil War. And so she kind of tiptoed and nuanced around that, even though we know it's true. She knows it's true. But she's trying to cut into Trump's vote, and that was the way that she had to do it. So in her mind, in politics, it was justified so that she doesn't anger Trump's radical, far-right, white nationalist wing, which they exist. And in saying that, those of you that might be shaking your head, it's true, right? The Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, these aren't fictional entities that exist. No. They are a voting bloc. They most certainly are a voting bloc, which is why Trump in the election wouldn't denounce them. Yeah. And so let's just acknowledge that they're there. Let's just acknowledge that they do support Donald Trump. It doesn't mean that Donald Trump's... I'm not saying Donald Trump's a racist. That's a separate conversation.
I'll say it.
She'll say it. But... Haley's trying to compete, and there are these different voting blocks, and she didn't want to upset them.
Although I'm going to push back on, you said it looks like Biden is going to kind of cruise. I don't know. I think that there is a large swath of Democrats that are very, very upset about his policy in Israel right now, about what feels like complicity in a genocide.
Are we going there?
Well... I know we're going to do maybe a whole episode, but definitely a deep dive on the Israel stuff. But I think it's worth mentioning. I think that there is real trouble in the Democratic Party because they are not recognizing that people age 40, 30 and younger are not having this policy and are not happy, myself included. Yeah. Very unhappy and feeling very conflicted about voting for someone who is funding the killing of innocents.
It feels to me that we're where we were during the primaries last time when Bernie was still in and Elizabeth, your girl, was still in. Yeah. And I got invited by someone Doug Padgett, to the DCCC in D.C. I don't remember what the event was. It was small. It was a table. I was in town. Yeah. So it wasn't like I was invited. I was invited. And some Christianish thinkers were there and a couple congressmen. And during the break, my view was this country most certainly is not ready for an AOC, an Elizabeth Warren, or Bernie Sanders. 1/3 of the country identifies as conservative, 1/3 of the country identifies as moderate, and 1/3 identifies as liberal. The vote, in my view, the votes just aren't there. And so I was telling them this during this lunch break. I was saying, guys, the only person that could beat Donald Trump is Joe Biden. I know you love Bernie. I understand that the political views, and I'm speaking to you as well, but I just don't think that Elizabeth would have beaten Trump. And I think we're in the same place right now where I know millions of people are really upset about a few issues. But when you're looking at that ballot and it's Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I sure hope to God that those who are really upset about some of Biden's policies will pick the lesser of two evils.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, please do.
And I'm, I'll be honest, I'm not clear on what I would do in that. But I would never vote for Trump. Okay. I would never vote for Trump. But I have to say that I have a real conflict in voting for Biden because it sends a message to the Arab world that we're okay with what's happening. And that is really uncomfortable for me. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I certainly wouldn't tick Trump. But it's a conflict. Yeah.
I think we need to have an episode devoted to it. Yeah. Because I have some nuanced views on it. And I think we're probably far more in agreement than we're in disagreement. Man, a lot's transpired since the early weeks of that conflict. And now it looks far more like a genocide than it did when I was defending the retaliation, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it does. And, I will just give a little preview that I have been in occupied Palestine. I have been on trips where I have spoken with peacekeepers, spoken with people, and I've been to Israel many times as well. And so, not to say that I'm an expert, but I certainly have seen with my own eyes what the Palestinians have been living under for a long time. And until I saw it with my own eyes, I could not have imagined.
Wow.
All right, let's talk about what's happening now.
Okay, well, in the polls, we have the CNN poll, we have the McLaughlin poll. I just can't believe it, but Trump is up in these polls by a few points, dependent on the poll. Current Trump
over
Biden on a national poll.
Oh,
of course, this is in states, which is the meal ticket, but just the very fact.
Yeah.
The very fact that this is a reality.
It actually makes my stomach hurt. And I'm thinking back to you and I were together when the Trump, presidency and win over Hillary Clinton was announced. And, I had brought a bottle of wine over and we had a bunch of friends together, and we just completely assumed that we would be like opening that, I think it was champagne, when Hillary won. And just that sinking feeling of like, I can't believe this is happening. And I can't believe we're there again, that this might happen again.
It could happen again. And to my Republican friends, to be as clear as I can, I was not a supporter of Trump, and I wasn't a supporter of Trump. And the main reason was because I believed that Donald Trump would divide the nation and destroy the party. Yeah. That his style of politics and vitriol was not a good role model to our children, and that despite policies like abortion, we all knew abortion, even if Roe was overturned, it was not going to reduce abortions in the 21st century, and it hasn't. In fact, anyway, that's another topic, but I didn't think he would be good for the fabric of our nation. And that was the basis of my viewpoint. And I still believe that. It doesn't mean, if you want to call me a rhino, call me a rhino. That's fine. But I don't think our nation is in better shape today as a result of Donald Trump coming into the political arena. Well,
let's look at the legacy of Donald Trump. The Roe v. Wade overturned, as you said, it's not reducing abortions, but it's making them difficult for women. Women are having to leave the state in some cases. What it really is making difficult is complicated pregnancies. And we are seeing devastating stories of women who have children that are pregnant with a wanted pregnancy, that are having issues, ectopic pregnancy, and they're not able to get the medical care that is standard of care because of these abortion laws. It's really barbaric what's happening to women.
And we're divided on this issue, but I think what I struggle with, two things, as a believer, as someone that looks at the teachings of Jesus very seriously, and as somebody with a degree from a very conservative evangelical seminary, we were taught that you do not add to the scripture and you do not take away. And ironically, Jesus, even though abortions were more common then than they are today in ancient times, Jesus never once spoke about that particular form of, evil, if you will. Yeah. And that is a question I learned in conservative seminary. Conservative scholars said to me, biblical scholars, this is something we have to wrestle with. Yeah. Because surely if Jesus was as fired up about it as evangelicals are today, he would have said something about it. But I think even that's a theological issue. The other issue, though, is people like to say abortion is murder. I'm pro-life across the board, meaning I'm for a culture of life. But a first-degree murder, as we all know, is a premeditated murder, right? That's what separates first and second-degree murder. If abortion is murder, it's a first-degree murder, right? A woman plans it, she goes in, and she terminates her pregnancy, or as they would say, murder the child. Our country does not believe it's first-degree murder. We believe first-degree murder is first-degree murder. Like, if I was to plan and go murder someone, no one would doubt that. Right. But 70% of the population says that abortion is different than me going right now and getting a gun and killing someone.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, though, around this topic of abortion, that is the reason a lot of Christians voted for Trump last time.
Oh,
Since
the 70s.
We know
We
know people that said, I'm holding
single
my
vote,
nose.
single issue voters.
But I care so much about abortion. And so he did it. He overturned Roe v. Wade. So what is the excuse now for Christians to vote for Trump? Because that already got done.
That's a good point.
Like, could that reduce some people voting for him because we checked that box off?
The issue is bigger than abortion. The issue, I mean, we're going to talk about this a lot, but my very limited, whimsical view is that people are really upset that the country has gone left. It's gone left. Well, I mean,
what are they upset about? I know what it means, but what do you think that they're specifically upset about?
People are afraid of the LGBTQ community.
Yes,
they're
correct.
afraid of trans people. They're afraid that there is a group of tens of millions of people in this country on the left, that don't just tolerate diversity, they celebrate it.
Right.
And you fall into this camp.
I do.
Racial, ethnic, cultural, food, right? And,
Yay.
and they wouldn't only say they celebrate it, they believe that flag just means diversity, independence, and freedom. And you could make a really strong argument that that's what the whole project was about. Yeah. And you have people on the other side who think that's the opposite of where, like, how do you solve that problem, Kristen?
I think.
Come on, 30 seconds.
I think they die off. I think this is a generational thing also. I mean, I think most young kids are not fearful. They're not like, the people that you're describing that are like cowering in their homes that the trans people are going to ruin America are older. Younger people now know trans people. They know, Hispanic people, Black people, they are in school with each other. Like there's no longer this sort of other. So my hope is that it's just going to improve generationally, I guess.
Well, I think, you're not going to stop it because this is a sociological trend. It happened in Europe over the course of, 100 years. Nothing is going to stop even the racial diversity. Yeah. This country is going to be primarily brown. Whites will be a minority in another 10, 15 years. Yes. And there are people very upset about that. And some, even Trump is saying, he says these words, that they are poisoning our blood.
Oh, yeah, he's
And
pandering.
I have poisoned blood.
Pandering.
I'm half Mexican.
That's right.
And so I have poisoned blood. Dang it. What do I do?
Yeah. But he is pandering to that racism.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
there. And if you're listening and you're a Trump supporter or Republican, I think this is where it's really difficult to shoot the messenger. Like this guy, Paul Martin, is, I'm not trying to be divisive here. These are facts.
That's right.
Trump is saying these things, and there are a lot of people very upset because they feel that the ethnic core, as Pat Buchanan has said and others have said, of this country is being depleted by immigrants. That's just a reality. So I'm not trying to be divisive. Yeah. I'm just trying to say, so what do we do? And is electing Republicans like Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, those types of Republicans, going to solve the problem?
It's not. It's just going to divide the nation more. I mean, electing Trump is not going to change the fact that many of our largest cities are majority minority. Nothing will dial that back unless we engage in a genocide. Like, we are a multiracial, multi-ethnic country. We can't change that. So we have to learn how to live.
And this is nothing new. It happened with the Irish. It happened with the Italians. My mother remembers.
You're half Italian.
Yeah, she remembers the 1950s. It was not pretty to be Italian. And now we have, and I'm not excusing what's happening at the border. We have massive issues. Yeah. But there is just a shift happening here in this nation having to do with just, I'm going to say, under the umbrella of diversity, whether it's racial, ethnic, sexuality, gender. Yeah. And I think the Republicans somehow believe that legislation or elected officials are going to change, what Ron DeSantis did in Florida with books. That's fine. You can ban certain books, but a lot of the kids have this thing called the internet, where they might be able to read whatever they want and beyond. And so this idea that we're somehow going to put a moat around diverse ideas is silly.
It's theatrics. I'm from Florida. My nieces and nephews live in Florida. They are reading all the same books everyone else is. These teenagers are not in silos, you know. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to take us on a different note, which is we've got a lot of lawsuits against Trump.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any chance, tell me there's a chance, that one of these lawsuits bangs him out of eligibility to run for president? Is that at all possible?
It is possible, but I mean, he's a serious fighter, this guy, and that's why people like him. And he knows how to work or manipulate the judicial system. And his game right now is delay. With E. Jean Carroll, he wasn't able to. That ship sailed, and then it sailed again because he had to slam her again to the tune of $83 million. But in the D.C. Case, this thing's been held up because Trump appealed, and he's trying to go after this idea, not to get technical, but this presidential immunity notion that presidents should forever be immune.
Let's talk about the E. Jean Carroll case as well.
Okay.
So he was charged with civilly. This was a civil case. He has to pay her $80 million. And we're now seeing the right really coming out and smearing E. Jean Carroll. We're seeing people resurfacing an old interview that she had with Anderson Cooper, in which she was, in my opinion, talking about how men enjoy rape fantasies, but people are misinterpreting that as her talking about rape fantasies. And we're just seeing, I mean, it's just, again, having grown up Republican and Christian, the fact that this is the candidate who has now been charged with rape. And now, instead of adjusting to that and maybe looking at another candidate, people are doubling down and smearing this woman that he raped.
The loyalty people have to this person and this party cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
And he famously said decades ago, I could walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot someone in the head or face or whatever, and they'd forgive me or I'd be fine. And there is a degree to which he is Teflon Don. It doesn't matter what this guy does. He has been able to wrest from tens of millions of America loyalty.
Yeah.
I mean, even now with Taylor Swift, I mean, you have Republicans going after the NFL.
Oh my
a
gosh,
red state, Kansas.
Football. The American pastime.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, I've never been a big Taylor Swift fan. I just haven't paid much attention, but I have been more recently. And I watched a little bit of her at the Grammys. And to those of you listening, you're going to say, well, duh, that's Taylor Swift. But gosh, what a class act. I just haven't paid much attention to her. Just
I agree.
Watching her celebrate other people's victories, and we're like, to the tens of millions of Republicans whose daughters were raised on Taylor Swift, and not just raised on her, but raised on kind of a commitment to decency that she's exemplified for a generation.
The
see
girl
these people
power
turn
vibes,
right, and with so many negative influences potentially in the media or in entertainment, and then you have this one individual who's done a pretty damn decent job. Yeah. And then, man, just do not mess with Donald Trump, or we're coming after you.
Yes.
And it's weird to watch.
It is weird to watch.
I think with E. Jean Carroll, what gets me is, if I have a daughter, and you know, there are 20 women that have come forward with Trump. I'm not talking about Stormy Daniels. That was consensual, not the porn star, but others
20 women who have alleged sexual assault.
And just to see people just dismiss it out of hand, and it doesn't seem human to me.
No.
If you're listening and you're a Trump supporter and this was your daughter, it doesn't seem rational.
Yeah.
I'm not saying some of them might not be making it up. Maybe they are, but to dismiss 20 women as being opportunists and liars without looking at the evidence is just, there is a decay happening in this nation. I see it on the left. I see it on the right as well.
Yeah. And I want to say, you know, E. Jean Carroll, she is a little wacky. You know, she's a little out of hand. She says things that are wild. That doesn't mean, like, regardless of how her personality may be a bit different, that doesn't mean that this case that was, you know, tried by a judge is not true.
Yeah.
She gets to be a wacky person. Yeah. And it is still true.
Yeah, we've come to this binary where a Republican can't say, you know, Biden, you know, there was a global recession during the pandemic and after the pandemic. It wasn't just the U.S. Or global inflation. And wow, unemployment's below 4%, and we've had 11 straight months of recovery in terms of costs of goods. We're seeing the economy's coming back.
Yeah,
he's given what he was handed. Remember COVID?
Yeah.
Remember the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
But people just aren't able to give credit where credit is due. Trump passed a hell of a prison reform bill. He joined with Van Jones to do this. I'll give Trump credit for relieving thousands of minorities who were in prison for minor drug offenses. I'll give him credit for that. But we just don't seem to be able to give credit where credit is due these days. No. It's binary. The Democrats are bad and my team's good, or vice versa.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I think what's interesting is one of the areas that we're actually seeing some bipartisanship coming together is in campaign finance reform, which is very interesting. And then what we're seeing there is it's not party drawn. It's more the younger generation of politicians who are saying, hey, this is really corrupt. Yeah. And then the older folks, and I'll say for my party, Nancy Pelosi, like, come on, ma'am. I mean, she is taking money and making all kinds of comments that I think are very influenced by the funding that she gets, and I think we're seeing that across the board. I don't think we'll ever have real, true political change in our country until our politicians are not muzzled by their funders. Yeah. Whether that be the NRA, whether that be the Nation of Israel, everyone is puppets based on who they're getting their funding from.
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing I want to talk about, unless you have something else.
No.
We have watched since 2018 also gun violence just continue to increase in our country. Yeah. And speaking of, NRA funding, I think that is yet another issue that remains so problematic in our country, unique to our country. We don't see this happening anywhere else. Yeah. And I think that that's another conversation to be had, is the fact that we continue to have politicians who don't act in favor of public safety, especially for our children.
We don't. And to hear so many on the right, so many Republicans out of hand dismiss another mass shooting as with the white flag, there's nothing we can really do about it. There's so many guns out there. I mean, imagine if we did that with terrorism.
Right.
When it comes to a terrorist attack, and these are terrorist attacks, many of them, white supremacist terrorist attacks, the Republicans, the party of strength, peace through strength, doesn't cower and say, there's nothing we can do about it, guys. And again, this is where it becomes binary. I, as a Republican, was awarded the Moms Demand Action Candidate Distinction Award, not because I'm against the Second Amendment. I own guns. I always have. I love this idea of a Second Amendment, but I also like the idea of simple measures like universal background checks, of which something like 80% of Americans agree with.
Right.
But
that's right.
Many Republicans in Congress aren't having any of it because of the dollars given to them through groups like the NRA.
Or banning assault rifles. There's just no reason for a citizen to own an AR-15. Yeah. There's just no reason.
I was having this conversation last year with someone locally here in Red Orange County, and it was a woman, and she's like, I just don't get what these guys are doing. Like, my husband loves his AR-15, and he has a right to go to the shooting range and use it. And I'm with everything in me, I had to just keep my mouth shut because, wait, your husband having his little toy is more important. I mean, I think most people don't understand what these things are. It's not so much that they shoot, they could be tweaked a bit to shoot as a machine gun, an actual machine gun, but it's the velocity and the way in which the bullets pulverize the body.
That's right.
And blow holes. Yeah. And they're not meant to be on the streets. They're only meant to be in battle.
They are not self-defense weapons. They are mass destruction weapons.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet this is another polarized issue, and it's disappointing. And this is an issue where I think we mostly agree. Yeah. I think 70% of Americans would say they're in agreement, but the tail's wagging the dog, and those are the dollars that come from the NRA and groups like that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, what are we looking forward to in the next couple weeks?
Well, it's going to be busy. I mean, I can't believe this is the election year. This week, the ruling in the presidential immunity should come down. That'll get kicked up to the Supreme Court either way. Whether the Supreme Court takes it, we don't know. And then I think if we thought the last election was fluid, this is going to get nasty and nastier and nastier.
Yes.
And we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
But just reiterating, Kristen and I are friends, and we hope this isn't just a podcast or a video to have a video, but we really hope this could help people in their relationships, because we have to be able to have civil conversations with people, not demonize them. It's just not helping anyone.
Yeah, and I think our hope as well is, to inform, and that we're going to do some research, and we want to give an update that is, obviously we're both going to have biases.
Yeah.
But I hope that we're going to present information in a way that we're looking at all sides, that we're able to kind of see the nuance, that we're not just coming in here and repeating our party talking points.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we will catch you guys next week.
See ya.